What's going on, guys? So this is a dusty IS300. I've got to clean it, but this is an Infinity G35 accelerator pedal. IS300 came with a cable pedal. This is a drive-by-wire accelerator position sensor, accelerator pedal position sensor pedal. So I've adapted this to fit my car. It fits perfectly. You can even see that I have the IS300 foot pad sitting on the bottom of the pedal arm. Now, in short, what I had to do to get this to fit my car is I had to bend this pedal arm up. I want to say it was about 45 degrees, but my memory could be wrong. The IS300 pedal pad, I had to do some modifications to get it to fit, but in short, what those modifications were was I had to cut off a little 90-degree section of this pedal arm that took an abrupt 90. So I had to cut that off, and I was able to slip the pedal pad onto the Infinity G35 assembly. And I've held it on with some copper wire on the back. As you can see, I JB welded it just for peace of mind because my foot's going to be on this. I don't want it to slip off and then, I don't know, that would be bad. So I JB welded it, but the JB weld is not to hold the pedal pad. The JB weld is just to lock everything in place. The wire that's going around it, the IS300 had a tension pin or a roll pin, depending on what your area of the country is and what you call it. IS300 had a pin that went through this pedal pad that held it onto the bar. I had to knock that out with a punch tool and a hammer, and I attempted to drill through this pedal arm, but my drill bit just wasn't cutting it, for one, and two, I don't have a drill press, so I can't drill a perfectly straight hole into a round bar, even if I have the steadiest hands in the world, which I don't. I think mine are like the second steadiest hands in the world, maybe third. There's an argument for second. That's the basics of how I got this set up. If you're handy, you could look, you're probably figuring out in your mind like how to do this same thing. I'm not going to walk you through all of the steps on how to do it because it's really not that hard. Getting this to fit in the car is even easier. So the IS300 mount, there's 40 millimeters between the two bolt holes on the IS300 mount, these two holes on the bottom of the pedal assembly. This also has 40 millimeters between, if you measure center to center between those two bolt holes, it's 40 millimeters. I put a stud in this top hole where I have my finger near. I put a stud in that top hole in the floorboard of the IS300 just to help guide this on. That stud is an M6 diameter stud. I think M6 by 1 is the Toyota thread pitch. Adapting this to the car was really easy. Now, if you're thinking like, oh cool, I want to put this on my car. Well, let me stop you and just say, if you have a fully factory IS300 and you're still running the factory computer, you cannot do this. The reason is the Infinity G35 drive-by-wire, so the pedal position sensor, this is a 6-wire pedal position sensor. The IS300 pedal position sensor, it's on the throttle body, but it's a 4-wire. What you need to do is you need an engine management, like the engine management that I have is at Haltech. My Haltech is an Elite 2500. You can use other engine managements. I'm more familiar with Haltech, but I've used the other ones, and it's, as long as they can support drive-by-wire, you can set this up on that car. It's from an Infinity G35. Like that's the reason why I went with this pedal is there are so many Infinity G35s on the road, for one, and there's enough on the road that there's a ton of them being parted out because people modify them and then they modify them incorrectly and then the car dies. And then the next stage of his life is being parted out to serve its purpose in all of the other Infinity G35s in the world. Since there are a lot of them on the road, it's really easy to come across a replacement pedal position sensor, and it's also really easy to come across the pinout for these 6 wires. That pinout I'm going to go through later in this video. So I talked about what you need to physically do in order to make this bolt into your car. I'll go more in depth in the wiring a little bit later. If you want to see that part of the video, you can jump to the progress bar down below and jump forward to that section of the video. I'll also talk about the configuration of this in the Haltech if you want to jump straight to that portion of the video. Along with this pedal position sensor, you can't use the Toyota original throttle body. I don't know why you would be changing out something like this and you would still want to try to use your Toyota original throttle body, but just to reassure you, you can't. You have to buy a legitimate drive-by-wire throttle body. I say legitimate because the one that came in this car originally, it's like this weird hybrid setup thing. It's a cable throttle that goes to a pedal position sensor that sits on the throttle body. So the throttle body is partially cable controlled, but it's also electronic. It gives the ECU the ability to back off of the throttle a little bit, which is one of the advantages of running a drive-by-wire setup. Is it does make the driving experience a little bit safer. I'm going to talk more about the advantages of this in short a little bit later. The throttle body that I have is a Bosch 82mm, and it's actually a used one off of a Porsche 997 GT3. So it's 82mm, it's considerably large. But another one of the advantages of having this drive-by-wire setup is you can run a large throttle body, but you can tailor the opening of the throttle body that's on the front of the intake manifold specifically to what you want your pedal feel to be. It's an 82mm throttle body, and I can have it open slowly if I want to. It's opening in relation to the size of the engine. It's opening how much I want it to open, if that makes sense. This specific pedal is 6 pins, but it has 2 different sensor grounds going into it and 2 different 5-volt signals going into it. Those grounds absolutely need to be not chassis ground. They need to go straight to your ECU's signal ground. So there's not too many other wires that are involved. You have the 2 wires that are the signal wires that go to the pedal position sensor, APP1 and APP2. And on the throttle body, you also have 2 throttle position sensors that have 2 signal wires that go to your ECU. Most engine managements will require you to have 2 APP or pedal position sensor wires and 2 throttle position sensor wires. So something like this does require you to have 3 more inputs going into your ECU and then 2 dedicated motor outputs going to the throttle body motor. Where if I just had a TPS sensor, then I would just have one wire, and then I would have a couple of output wires that are going to an idle air control valve. So having this replaces the need of an idle air control valve. But if I had a cable throttle and I'd put that on this car, I would definitely need some kind of an idle air control valve. As far as wiring this into your car, if you have a Haltech, you need, I think, an Elite 1500 or an Elite 2500 to be able to control the drive-by-wire setup. I have an Elite 2500. It's incredibly easy. TPS 1 and 2, you can actually get those backwards. It doesn't matter. It's kind of hard to wire it wrong. It's 6 pins, but it's not really overwhelming because 2 of them are 5 volts. 2 of them are signals. You can swap those as long as you don't swap a 5 volt and a signal. You can swap the 2 5 volts, you could swap the 2 signals, it doesn't matter. I'll have the part number for this connector popping up if you don't want to get it. It's like, fortunately, I bought a used one. This came with a little pigtail that was already the connector from Nissan that they just, whatever junkyard, they just cut the wires on it. So I got the connector with it too. The drive-by-wire motor, the 2 motor leads that are the larger wires that go onto the throttle body, they're not polarity specific. You can wire whichever one you want. You can wire it in and then you can clip those 2 wires and you can flip them around completely. You have to calibrate it again if you do that, but it doesn't matter which wire goes to what. As long as you have both of those motor wires that are coming out of the Haltech that are for the motor going to the throttle body motor connection. The throttle position sensor, the 2 signal out wires that are telling the position of the throttle position sensor. So those 2 signal out wires, TPS 1, TPS 2, you could switch those around, it does not matter. Haltech during the calibration process figures out what is what while it's doing its whole calibration process. It figures out how to control the motor while you're going through the calibration process. So you just put the motor wires on the motor, put the TPS signal wires on the TPS, and then you have, again, a 5 volt and a ground. That sensor ground ties in with the sensor ground on these and does not touch chassis ground at all. It goes directly back to the Haltech. So I'll have the pinout popping up for the throttle body also if you want to get a Bosch throttle body. You don't need an 82mm one, you can get one of the smaller ones. They will be cheaper. I kind of like saying that I have a Porsche 997 GT3 throttle body on the car because I just think it's cool. If you have an engine management on your car, just get one of these. This was like 40 bucks, I think. Get an adapter for going on the front of your intake manifold, get a drive-by-wire throttle body, and run a couple extra wires to, hopefully you're running a Haltech engine management, but if you're running another engine management, you can have that drive-by-wire setup as well. And also, one of the other advantages to having a drive-by-wire throttle and the pedal position sensor, all that stuff, is with the IS300, I have 4 different wheel speed sensors that are on this. I have fed those into my Haltech. So I've actually fed 2 of them into the Haltech. The other 2 are ready to be wired in if one of the other 2 fail. But basically I have a front wheel speed sensor and a rear wheel speed sensor. And if the rear wheels are spinning faster than the front wheels and I'm going down the road, the Haltech can back my throttle off 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever I want that's within that 10 to 30% range. It can back off the throttle for me and probably save me from spinning out and going into a ditch if I start to hydroplane, I don't know. So whatever the scenario is, it would back off the throttle 10, 20, 30%. It can also help out with launch control. If your rear wheels are spinning faster than your front wheels, it could back off the throttle also. So there's a ton of benefits to having this, especially in a performance car and a modified car, and if you're going to be driving it on the street. This gives you far more control over a larger throttle body that is cable driven. So is running a drive-by-wire throttle body over a cable throttle, is it safe? Yes, it is safe. Haltech there's a reason why they have 2 different sensor wires on the pedal position sensor and 2 different sensor wires on the throttle body. And most automotive manufacturers do it the same way. You have 2 different sensors on the pedal position sensor and the throttle position sensor because they're comparing against each other to see if it's not operating like it's supposed to, and if it's not operating like it's supposed to, it can just shut off your throttle. I'm hoping my pedal position sensor works because I actually dropped it about an hour ago. I'm hoping that didn't mess up the pedal position sensor somehow, but if it did, it's a cheap sensor. So I'll just get another sensor, I'll throw it in. Calibrating it in the Haltech is really simple. And speaking of that calibration, if this calibration works, I'm going to bolt the pedal back in and then continue on with this video, walking you through the configuration and the different things that are in the in ESP, or if you want to use NSP, I'll be walking you through the ESP setup in Haltech, but NSP is not that different from the ESP for the Elite platform. ESP is the older configuration software for the Elite series ECUs. NSP is their modern Nexus software that is considerably better. I'm still getting used to that. That's why my car is still set up on ESP, because ESP is what I know. I'm learning about NSP. So let's jump into the configuration of this. All right, so this is my ESP software. Again, NSP is the newest. You need to update your firmware on your actual Haltech that's plugged into the IS300 or whatever your car is. Going online, or I'll speed this up a little bit. Okay, so I just want to go over my diagnostic tab really quickly. I just want to check and see, since after I dropped the sensor, if it does work as normal. I do have to recalibrate it, but so there's a pedal position sensor, so it says, yeah. And it maxes out at its normal voltage. Cool. So good deal. So that works. So I'm going to show you what it would look like if you don't have it enabled. So you would have throttle position sensor enabled, which I don't have that down. Let me add that up to the top. Throttle position sensor. So that's added to the top. Let me remove drive-by-wire. So throttle position sensor, whatever the connection would be, I don't know. The defaults, what you might have it connected to if you followed their wire diagram on the Haltech wire diagram that comes with this, it would say AVI 10 is the connection. So I just put it on AVI 3 because that is one of the connections. But so you have your calibration stuff that's just for throttle position sensor, but like this is how it would be. Clear that error. So this is how it would be if you're starting it up and you're like, okay, so right now I have throttle position sensor that's enabled. You would need to come down here and add it to where it says drive-by-wire. So you would need to select drive-by-wire. Mine's orange. That means it's already selected, but it's not enabled. So it's up here. So if you select this and you still have throttle position sensor enabled, it's going to tell you there's a conflicting, it's going to give you some errors. And I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to disconnect my throttle position sensor that I don't have on the car because I'm running drive-by-wire throttle position sensors. So you can also check that box in the bottom left so you don't see it anymore. But these should be assigned automatically, AVI 2, 3, 4, 5. You absolutely need to use AVIs 2, 3, 4, and 5. You cannot use any other AVIs. AVI 2 and 3 has to be for TPS. AVI 4 and 5 has to be for your pedal sensor. You can switch these around for APPs and you can switch these around for TPS, but you can't swap them over to the other channels. Haltech has a very specific way they want it wired because of how they have what they call a supervisor chip that monitors these 4 wires on a throttle position setup and on a pedal, on the APPS setup, on the throttle position sensor and the pedal position sensor setup. So it has to be wired per their instructions. You can't edit the motor connections because these 2 wires are only for the drive-by-wire motor. So on the calibration tab, this would be blank, and I think the screen text actually shows red if you haven't calibrated it yet. So I'm gonna hit reset. So right now I'm just going to hit calibrate and it's going to walk me through steps. So it says step 1, I had to have my foot all the way off the pedal. Step 2, I'm going to press it all the way, and now that I have it pressed all the way as hard as I can press the pedal, I'm going to press calibrate. And it says calibration good. So it's if you're having trouble with your pedal position sensor, you might be able to recalibrate it. And like say you've been driving the car for a little while, you might be able to recalibrate it and then get it to work again. But that might be just good enough for you to drive it somewhere if you're stuck in a pinch and you just happen to have your laptop or a friend's laptop that's willing to download ESP, NSP, and connect via USB. So after I calibrate my pedal sensor, I'm going to come down here and press calibrate on the throttle position sensor and wait for it. The throttle body makes a bunch of noises. If you're watching it, it's kind of cool because it's like opening and closing and it's just testing. But yeah, it goes through everything that it needs. So you don't want to press the pedal or anything, you just sit and let it do its thing. And if you're watching my numbers up here on my gauge, my little Haltech CanArc gauge, it's just showing the numbers just going through, and it's showing what the throttle position sensor and everything is right now. So that's calibrated. I'm going to click apply, and then I'm going to close this out. ECU needs to be rebooted. You can do this, or you can do Control F12, and it'll reboot the ECU. So that is done. I'm going to go up and check that it's loaded the calibration stuff properly. Drive-by-wire. Yeah, you can set up your own diagnostics if you want to, but it's thrown in numbers like above certain TPS voltage, above this other APP voltage. These are default values. These aren't values from the calibration. If you notice, let me go over here. to, oh, wiring is going to show so my lowest voltage for the TPS1 is 0.5, highest voltage is 4. Let's see, like APP, I have 0.6 volts and I have 0.2 volts. So I can set up my own diagnostics below those voltages if I want to, if I don't want it to go like below like minimum, maximum, whatever. But over here in calibration, you can see like I have these checked for like brake pedal enable vehicle speed check. I'm actually going to enable that. But enable or disable, you can disable it. It gives you like a yellow warning thing because it's recommended, but I believe you can run without it. I have a brake pedal sensor, a brake pedal switch. So I've fed my brake pedal into the throttle body, and my max throttle position, my max TPS percentage, it's like if I have my brake pedal pressed, I can only give 20% throttle, and I think you can go up to 40% on that. So that's that. You can adjust this pedal curve down here. So you can see I've got mine adjusted. I haven't tuned this yet, but I've set up this pedal curve based off of what I think I'm going to like with how this engine is going to be running. But you can adjust it to where you have a very difficult pedal to, not difficult pedal, but you have a little more low end control over your pedal, and it's not as touchy. Or you can make it where it's more linear, where it would be like this would be closer to what it's like if you have a cable throttle set up, where it just opens and it's just a linear cable pull. If you want to be crazy aggressive with it and make it where it's almost undrivable, you can do something like this. But this is nice because this replaces the need of any kind of PID control if you're controlling the motor. So and it probably makes it a lot safer too, as far as Haltech is concerned. So I'm as far as their company, as they're concerned. So I'm going to jump over here to the brake pedal switch really quickly and just show what I have set up. So my brake pedal, I have this. So right now I just pressed it and it shows on, press it again, it shows off. So state off, state on. So what I had to do on mine, if you notice, well, that's weird. Like, how did you wire it into your DPI? This is a ground input. And I was having trouble. The short of it, so I have mine running through my expander box, which is there's a slight delay, I think a 20 millisecond delay when using the expander box. So I will have a slight delay when braking, but I'm not too concerned about that. The reason I'm using this DPI2 instead of an AVI is there's really the only one that I had to use. So I ran mine through a relay, and it's a ground switch, so I have it set to falling. But if I were to wire my brake pedal, the wires that I'm using to run through my relay, I would normally be going into rising, because you want to see the voltage rise whenever you press the brake pedal. It's going to give 12 volts into the OEM ECU, which in this case it is going to be the Haltech ECU. But that's that, and then I have, yeah. So that's basically the calibration instructions in your functions. So down at the bottom, you have your drive-by wire, open rate damping and close rate damping, and that's basically like, it's kind of like a delay, if you could think of it as a delay, or a slower opening, I guess is a better way to put it. So whenever I press, if I have this set to 10 right now, then I'm going to have a slower opening. I'm going to lower this number as I'm tuning the engine, just to see what is just how the engine responds to having such a large throttle body. But right now I'm starting off with a 10, and I'll just lower that number as I'm going through. The close rate doesn't matter too much. I have mine set to 1. And then your lift rate damping, and this right now I've set this just temporarily. I've set this to a 65% maximum throttle position opening. And if you're like, well, why did you make it where it's a lower throttle position opening? Well, if you look at my drive-by wire, I know, I gotta stop, I gotta check that box. So mine's going to open till about right here. And then I'm going to either change this curve to what's more comfortable, or I'll probably change that percentage of the max TPS just for whatever is the most ideal setup for the car. But I'll be playing around with these two things, like 1, the pedal curve, and 2, this max opening percentage, because I don't want this throttle open 100% of the way, the throttle body. I don't want it open 100% of the way because it is such a large throttle body. Maybe it will run fine, but I don't want to be choking the engine out with too much air and it can't supply enough fuel. My injectors are large enough, they should be able to supply enough fuel, but if they can't, then if you do have smaller injectors, you can play with this max percentage opening and play with this calibration until you get it to where it runs and it's got a good pedal feel and you actually feel pretty safe driving it, even though you have a large throttle body. So that is everything that I could say about just configuring the drive-by-wire setup. It does, I think you also need a clutch pedal wired into your ECU, which I do have if you want to run something like cruise control. Like, I haven't enabled my cruise control yet, but your clutch switch, your brake pedal switch, so those are going to be needed if you're running a cruise control setup. So, and the sensor should work fine coming from the IS300 cruise control. So if you want to use cruise control, you can set up cruise control to run your engine. But yeah, that's it with the configuration. I'm going to click apply. I'm going to go back here and look at my diagnostics and see. Yeah, so throttle position, maximum 65% open. Voltage, my voltages look good. For TPS 1 and 2, voltages look good. Yeah. Anyway, so that's it. Thanks a lot for watching. And yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. Let me know down below, again, what other videos you want to see, what do you want to see me talk about. I'll be happy to, as long as I have the time to do it. So again, thanks a lot for watching. God bless you guys.